Lisa, is it Lisa today or someone else running the meeting?
Yep, it's me today.
Hi. Could you put up the meeting information?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It was up and then I was getting eScribe going and it's Monday on a Wednesday.
There we go. Thank you.
No problem at all.
And then tell me when you're ready.
All right, will do. Thank you. Oh, hold on just a second. Computer's challenging today. All right, Gwen, we're ready to go.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, we will call Administration and Finance to order. It is September 15th, 2021. We are still holding virtual meetings. So if people want to give public comment.
Gwen, sorry, Gwen, one quick second. Something's different here today.
Okay, I'll hold off. Tell me
okay,
when.
Hold on one quick second here. All right, let's try something different. All right, now let's give it a try.
Okay, are we?
Thanks, Gwen.
Are we? Yep, we're recording.
Yep.
We're good.
We're good.
All righty. I'm going to start over then. Good morning. I'm going to call Administration and Finance to order for the City of Missoula committee meetings. It is September 15th, 2021. We are still having virtual meetings. So if people want to provide public comment on items we are hearing today or on items not on the agenda, first of all, you can go to the city website and to the meetings and agenda link, and you will find a link in there to join the meeting to give public comment. You can also call our voicemail, leave a voicemail for us, a voicemail message. The phone number is 406-552-6012, and you can email us. The email address is council@ci.missoula.mt.us. Thank you, Lisa. If you would do roll call, that would be great.
I sure can. All right. All right, Stacy Anderson. Let's see.
She's not here.
All right. Mirta Becerra.
Present.
John Contos.
Here.
Heather Harp. No Heather today.
Not here.
Okay. Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Julie Merritt.
Present.
Jesse Ramos.
Present.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
Present.
Brian Von Losper.
Here.
And Heidi West.
Present.
So it looks like there are 10 members present, 2 absent.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have minutes from September 8th, 2021. Were there any changes to those minutes? I did have a change, Lisa, I think on page 3 under Miss Harp's comments, there was just a misspelling for the word insightful. It should be INSIGHTFUL.
Certainly.
Thank you. And so with that one change, those will stand approved. Excellent. Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? If so, you need to raise your hand, which you can press *9 to raise your hand if you're calling in. I'm not seeing any raised hands on public comment on items not on the agenda. So going back to our regular agenda, our first item is 3.1. It is ESRI Enterprise Geographic Information Services. And I believe we have Lee Mackholtz here to present on that. Lee, are you here? Or someone from IT?
She is in the attendee room, and I have tried multiple times to elevate her to panelist. Can you see if you can do it, Gwen?
I think that one worked.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I've been sitting here trying to do it. I apologize, Lee. Thank you.
I think she's in now.
Yeah,
Great.
All right. Lee, if you can unmute yourself. Oh, there you are. Great. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning. This, what I want to present to you real briefly today is simply the maintenance agreement for our GIS, our Geographic Information System software that is used to drive all of the work that we do in my division, and this software is used throughout pretty much every department in the city for various purposes. It is used to provide spatial data management, analysis, and mapping for all of the city. Our authoritative data sets that we provide include all public utility assets, street center lines, parcels, city limits, zoning. I could go on and on about how many authoritative data sets we work with. This particular software is the primary standard for GIS software in the nation, actually in the world. It's kind of the main software that's used. And our particular licensing gives us the ability to have a series of different types of users and provide to different types of services, from all of our power users being able to use all the desktop software to my ability to implement a full enterprise system that goes from the databases and that centralized geographic database through all of the services that we provide to the web. We have recently finished implementing and rebuilding our entire enterprise system. And we now have a GIS enterprise portal that provides all of our authoritative layers to all of the staff within the city, and also to the public through a whole series of web-based maps and applications and data services that they can access. And so this software just allows us to do our work and build all of the great maps and applications that we want to be able, that we have existing and that we want to be able to do more of as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from council regarding this item? Brian?
No questions, but I'm happy to make the recommended motion. Appreciate the details from Lee, and in the referral, and as is noted in the referral, this is an approved item in the budget.
Correct.
Thank you. That motion is in order. Julie Merritt.
And I don't know if Lee has the answer to this question or not, but it seems, I'm not sure how to put this. Like, I'm sure that there's a lot of other IT stuff that we spend this level of money on. And I'm kind of curious why this is singled out for city council approval, especially if it's a renewal of our existing contract. And maybe Dale can speak to that since he's on here. Not that that's a big deal. If the answer is, I don't know, that's fine.
Bill or Lee?
I was just told that it's over the threshold of that needs to go to council. So I'm trying to, here I am.
Administration's authority to enter into contracts is $25,000, regardless of whether it's a renewal or it's included in the budget. So all of those items should be coming before you.
Okay, so like every time our IT department spends money on licensing or computers, we're seeing all of those things?
You're seeing, you'll see them to the extent there's a contract involved greater than $25,000, they should be coming before council, yes.
Okay, all right. It seems, I guess it just seems to me like sometimes we're not seeing nearly enough of things like this, that it's maybe they're mostly all just falling under that $25,000 threshold. Would that be accurate, Dale?
I'm not sure, as a matter of practice, it should happening, but we need to review that to make sure that everything is going, if you aren't believing it. If you are not believing, you're seeing everything, so.
And this one is a specific contract for 3 years for the maintenance for that. And that allows me to keep the maintenance cost at a static level and a known level for multiple years. I could do this without a contract on an annual basis that's within my budget. But the dollars would increase each year. So
Okay.
yeah, in an attempt to save the money and to have that consistent cost, I do tend to enter into those multi-year contracts for these software purchases.
Oh, excellent. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. I'm fully in support of the motion.
Thanks. And yes, we do see a fair amount of multi-year contracts. So I don't think we have to see those every year then. That covers the contract period. But in general, I would say contracts are the bread and butter of administration and finance. Keeps me in business. Heather.
Thanks. Lee, I imagine this is probably software that are across our departments that they will be able to utilize to some capacity, hinted at in the referral itself. But in particular, as we've had a lot of issues around housing and homelessness and public safety, is this going to be a tool that those departments can use to track data points so we can see what trends are so that we can make more informed decisions going forward?
Yes, for sure. And we are already leveraging the software for some of those purposes. I know you have been familiar with the effort to find, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't know the exact name of the project, but the effort to find that another encampment position. We've leveraged our software in that task force to provide mapping and analysis for that. And so all of that is, so we're already there. We're already doing some of that work. And but yes, I'm happy to work with any of those teams to try and develop any kind of data sets that would help them track things spatially over long term.
Thank you very much, Lee. I'm in support.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually a very substantive issue that this covers. Okay, that motion is in order and I will call for public comment. So if anyone wants to comment on this, please raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, are there any other questions from council? Seeing none, we will have a roll call vote, Lisa.
All right. Mirta Becerra.
Yes.
John Contos.
Yes.
Heather Harp.
Yes.
Jordan Hess.
Yes.
Gwen Jones.
Yes.
Julie Merritt.
Yes.
Jesse Ramos.
Yes.
Amber Sherrill.
Yes.
Sandra Vasica.
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg.
Yes.
Heidi West.
Yes.
So that is unanimous for all in attendance.
Thank you. That will go into the consent agenda. And thank you, Lee, for your presentation, and Dale, Lee and Dale, for all of the answers on this. Okay, the next item we have is an appointment to the Public Art Committee. This is a mayoral appointment for Deborah Parker to the Public Art Committee to fill a vacated term, which will begin immediately and expire on June 30th, 2023. Is there anyone from the mayor's office to address this? I don't think so. But having read through the application, Ms. Parker seems like a good addition to the Public Art Committee. Are there any questions, or otherwise I'm looking for a motion on this matter? Ms. Hart.
Thanks, Gwen. I'm happy to make the recommendation of Deborah Parker to the Public Art Committee.
Thank you for that. That motion is in order. Is there any public comment on it? Seeing no raised hands, any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, we will take a roll call vote, Lisa.
All right, Mirta Becerra,
Yes.
John Contos,
Yes.
Heather Harp,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Jesse Ramos,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vasica,
Yes.
Brian von Lossberg,
Yes.
and Heidi West.
Yes.
So that's unanimous for everyone in attendance.
Thank you. That will go onto the consent agenda. The next item is an appointment to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee. And John Newman is the mayor's appointment. I believe that Mr. Newman has served on the planning board for quite a few years and was very involved with that. Are there any, I don't suppose there's anyone here to present from the mayor's office. Seeing no one, I'm looking for a motion or questions or comments. And Ms. Hart.
First question I have for you. Do you know who stepped down from this role midstream?
I do not. I'm sorry, I do not have that information.
I can-
Gail or Lisa, someone does?
Oh, sorry, Jim Gallipo retired, and so this is replacing his position.
Okay. Appreciate that. I'm happy to make the recommend motion for John Newman to the Impact Fee Committee.
Thank you for that. Excellent. Any public comment on this motion? Seeing no raised hands. Any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, we will take a roll call vote, Lisa.
Mirta Becerra,
Yes.
John Contos,
Yes.
Heather Harp,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Jesse Ramos,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vasica,
Yes.
Brian von Lossberg,
Yes.
Heidi West.
Yes.
So that's unanimous for all in attendance.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is 3.4. This is authorizing the submission of community development block grant coronavirus applications. And Montana James, good morning. We're looking forward to
morning.
hearing from you.
Good morning, everyone. I will share my screen. Tracy Pondorf is here as well, and we've got a quick presentation for you.
Great.
Okay. All right, I'll start it off here. My name is Tracy Pondorf. I'm the new ARPA Grants Administrator. I look forward to talking about ARPA with all of you in the near future, but today I'm here with Montana James. We're from Community Planning, Development, and Innovation, and we're going to talk about a CARES funding opportunity through the Montana Department of Commerce. So Montana DOC does require a resolution to authorize submission of grant applications. We are proposing 3 different applications, and we have representatives present for each of the 3 projects. So attendees should be Jesse Yeager. He's the Director of Development and Advocacy at the Poverello Center. Danielle Maiden is the ROC Program Manager at NeighborWorks Montana. And Donna Gockler is, of course, the Director of our Missoula Parks and Recreation Department. Before we give an overview of the projects, I'd like to share a bit of background information about the funding opportunity. I'll try and make it as painless as possible. Go ahead, Montana, next. So this line of CARES funding is specifically called CDBG-CV grants, Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus. The funding starts at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It comes through the state of Montana. It's specifically from the Montana Department of Commerce. There are 2 main guidelines for this funding. It needs to be used for projects that prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. And 70% of the funds must be used for projects that benefit low and moderate income individuals. Next. The state of Montana received 3 allocations of this funding, and they're combining all of the allocations into one funding opportunity. The Montana metro cities are only eligible to receive funding from the 2nd and 3rd allocations. For Missoula, that means the available funding is about 6.2 million out of the total 10.1 million. Only counties, cities, and towns can apply for the funding, though other entities can either partner with a county, city, or town or receive a subaward. Next. In addition to the federal guidelines, Montana DOC is specifically asking that these state CDBG-CV funds are used for public facility, public services, and housing and homelessness assistance projects. So with these parameters in mind, we're proposing a resolution to authorize submission of 3 separate applications for CDBG-CV funding: a subaward to the Poverello Center, a subaward to NeighborWorks Montana, and a grant to Missoula Parks and Recreation. Okay, I'll turn it over to Montana James, and she'll give a brief overview of the 3 projects.
Thanks, Tracy. So again, I'm Montana James. I'm Deputy Director for the Community Development Division and CPDI at the city. And as Tracy mentioned, the first project that we'd like to submit an application for would be a subaward to the Poverello Center to ask for a grant of $1 million to partially fund the purchase and renovation of a motel in order to create some single occupancy transitional housing units, specifically for veterans experiencing homelessness in the community, as well as some voucher-based permanent supportive housing units, administrative offices, and some community space. This project would greatly expand the capacity for emergency shelter and medical respite programs. And it's really key, as we all know, that access to stable and safe housing helps stop the spread of COVID-19, and houseless individuals in the community are much more at risk for contracting the virus. This grant will be added to an existing $1 million grant from the Veterans Administration, an already awarded city and pending Missoula County ARPA funds as well. The second project that we propose would be $1.3 million in grant funds for the Resident-Owned Communities program at NeighborWorks Montana. This program creates permanently affordable housing for low and moderate income residents by preserving existing manufactured home communities within the Missoula area, and supports the acquisition and preservation of at least 20 homes. Manufactured home communities are at significant risk in Missoula, especially now, of redevelopment, which would leave residents without access to affordable housing options. And any displacement from stable housing significantly increases the risk of exposure to COVID in the community for those residents. So the ROC program residents purchase and operate their communities, and that helps create stable and affordable places for these residents to call home. And lastly, as Tracy mentioned, the third project that we'd proposed for funding for these state CDBG CV funds is to Parks and Recreation, to transform Missoula's downtown Lions Park into a community hub that is safe, inclusive, supports community pride, and enhances public safety. The service area of downtown Lions Park is designated as a low moderate income neighborhood, which is a key component of the CDBG funds requirements, and it's in an established urban renewal district. So downtown Lion Park serves the North Side, West Side neighborhood, which is identified as experiencing some of the largest barriers to mental and physical health and having consistent or persistent poverty and crime. The neighborhood has about 9,000 residents, and as you can see, we have some high rates of poverty, childhood obesity, in the neighborhood, and 8.3% of the neighborhood residents identify as non-white. It's one of the highest populations of Native Americans in the city of Missoula. So this project would transform the park to create an inclusive and accessible place that supports community pride and highlights the identity of American Indians. Park spaces particularly provide outdoor safe recreation areas, and that's a call out in this grant funding to improve and create expanded outdoor recreation space to allow for social distancing and recreation that's safe during COVID-19. So I'll hand it back over to Tracy.
Yeah, just a little more information about the subaward structure, and this applies to the Poverello Center and NeighborWorks Montana applications. They're owning their own projects, so to speak, so it is a subaward versus partnering with the city. The city would receive the award and pass along the funding through a subaward, but as the award recipient, the city does ultimately hold responsibility for any post-award requirements. And something new with this funding opportunity is Montana DOC is allowing administrative costs in the budget as long as they are necessary and reasonable and do not exceed 10% of the project's total award. Our deadline to submit these applications is October 7th. If the city of Missoula submits more than one application, we must rank the applications. So in addition to a resolution to submit these applications, we're also seeking council input and public comment to inform prioritization. Okay, this concludes our presentation. And at this time, we welcome any additional comments or questions from the committee.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation, and I'm thrilled to hear about the first item, the hotel that would house veterans, homeless veterans, and that whole project. I've been hearing about that for a while and really hoping it would go forward. Questions and comments from council, Ms. Merritt.
My tile keeps moving around. A couple of questions. So with the first one that you talked about with the purchasing the hotel for the veterans that are experiencing homelessness, could you speak quickly to why is it important that veterans have a place where there's a single occupancy for them, just to kind of flesh out why it's so important that we do this for this population?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that Jill Bonney and Jesse Yeager from the Poverello Center are here. I think they might be in the attendee list. So I would love to have them speak to that as well. You know, this is a direction that the Veterans Administration has been moving in recent years and is a priority for that agency that serves veterans. Jesse, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I would say that if we could bring, Jill is with us in the participant stuff, so if we could bring Jill on board.
I think Jill is now in the meeting.
Excellent. So then I'll let my boss talk.
Yeah, really this idea was started from the VA making a move to wanting to have their veterans and transitional housing programs in rooms that are single occupancy. We've been doing this with our current program by placing any overflow, I guess, once all of our single occupancy rooms are full here and placing them into motels, which has gotten pretty spendy, but the VA has stated that they want to make a permanent move towards programs, having single occupancy rooms and bathrooms for veterans for, after COVID for safety reasons. So we just feel like this is going to help keep us competitive with our VA veteran programs going forward.
Thank you.
Can I a quick follow up on that? I've been told that for veterans, this is particularly important, even beyond COVID, that they are able to have a single occupancy because many of them struggle with PTSD and are just kind of have a higher need for having their own space. Would that be accurate, Jill?
Absolutely. And even, them being placed even in a single occupancy room in a congregate shelter is difficult for veterans who are struggling with PTSD. Just having to be in a building with 100 other individuals is difficult. Yep.
Thank you. And Gwen, if I would like to ask a question about the NeighborWorks.
Go ahead.
As well. So for this funding, is this for NeighborWorks to use in a more general sense to support things as they come up, or is there a specific properties that are being looked at to be protected with this money?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So Danielle Maiden, the NeighborWorks resident-owned community director, is here to speak to that application.
Thanks, Danielle.
Good morning. Right now, we are looking at a particular property, and depending on the timeline, we would like to use this to acquire a property that is in with the city limits. Depending on the timeline, if we are unable to use it, we would like to use it on a different property for acquisition purposes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, great questions. Thanks, Julie. Ms. West.
I have the same question about the property and that was answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Brian.
Thanks. A couple questions, if it's okay. First one to perhaps Jill at the POV. Been aware of the grant that existed initially, I think the $1 million one, and then the supplemental funding. I'm trying to tease out the value, sort of the incremental value of this funding in addition to the funding committed, and what it would provide essentially. Is it sort of like gap closing funding, or would it allow for extended operations or more rooms? Is my question making any sense?
Yep. So much of the funding that we already know that we have will go into the purchase price of the building. And then we would need to do renovations. We have to be up to life safety code for the VA. And so need to do renovations in that way. Also make sure we have some rooms that are ADA compliant. So really making sure we can do that. Also, the VA grant can only be used for those 20 rooms. And so if we're doing 10 to 15 units that would be used with vouchers, we would need to use other funding for that.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thanks. And if it's okay, Gwen, one question for, I think Donna's on. I was wondering, Donna, if you might be able to drill down a layer of detail on sort of what's envisioned in the proposal around the park area down near the bridge.
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen just briefly to give everybody a visual. During the downtown parks and trail planning process, we did a very robust public process around downtown Lyons. So the proposal does include a picnic shelter, play and exercise area, potential partnership with Garden City Harvest or others, perimeter paths, lighting, and the project would also include new lighting, widening of the trail, and wayfinding. This is kind of a confusing and sometimes referred to as a scary area for some residents. What we want to do is take this relatively vacant lot that is surrounded by Missoula youth homes, very close to the Poverello and some of the other services next to West Broadway Island, and also next to one of our significant housing facilities for individuals with disabilities, and essentially activate the park with an emphasis on local tribes and a partnership with Native Americans against drugs and alcohol.
Thanks. And Gwen, can I have one more question?
Sure.
Thanks. And I think maybe for, I'm not sure, Montana perhaps. So there was mention of a need or opportunity from a prioritization standpoint. That's likely difficult to do in a committee meeting structure like this, but I'm curious if staff has a preference or thoughts around input on prioritization.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So
from a process standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, the hope is today we're kind of kicking off the process. We're asking that council set a public hearing on September 27th, where we can provide a bit of an expanded presentation on the projects. And our goal is to really get public feedback at that public hearing on needs in the community for these funds, thoughts on the projects themselves, and if the public has any thoughts on level of priority for these projects. And certainly we would ask for the same type of feedback from council either today or at that public hearing, or even at the close of the public hearing the following week. And then we at the staff level can pull together any comments received and then kind of take that into our process and create that priority level before we submit. So that's a little bit about how we're thinking of it.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Amber.
Yeah, thanks. I think Julie actually asked most of my questions, but I'm just kind of curious about, they all seem like great projects, and I agree with Brian that the prioritization is going to be difficult. I'm sure you're already finding that. So I will be interested to hear public comment on some of these projects. But I'm just curious, because I'm not familiar with it, how the sub award, like how the concept works, as far as I understand that we're a pass through, but what is the city's responsibility post award and with reporting and whatever requirements there are? Could someone speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. And Tracy, jump in. I know you've done some research and work on this as well. But essentially the city is the recipient in terms of the Montana Department of Commerce award. And then we would subcontract with the partner agency doing the work. In the case of Parks and Rec, I don't think that's necessary since we're all part of the same entity. And then we would ultimately be responsible for providing that reporting to the Department of Commerce, completing the environmental review record for each project, and making sure that we're in compliance with all the CDBG COVID regs, which we are well positioned to do since our grants team has administered the city direct CDBG CV funds already. And then we would just process payments. You know, we would request payments from MDOC and then remit them on to the partner agency. But as Tracy mentioned, we are ultimately the grant recipient and responsible for all of the reporting and data collection and compliance.
Great, thank you. Heidi.
So I was wondering if you could just briefly tally up what the 3 grants together are. And then I was wondering if you had any idea on a statewide level how many other communities are going to be submitting for these funds. I know in Missoula, I feel like we're fairly lucky with all of our robust public processes that we often have projects that are fairly shovel ready, and we can take advantage of these opportunities. And I was just curious if, I don't know if there was like a informational meeting ahead of time that where what Great Falls or Helena or any of those other communities are planning on submitting.
Yeah, that's a hard question. We don't really have a sense. We've had some informal conversations. Tracy has reached out to some of those communities. Missoula County is also an eligible applicant, so Missoula County will likely have a few projects as well, and we've coordinated with them a little bit on that. But it's really hard to tell what the total requests will be. That's part of the interesting process of these funds. It's a pretty quick application turnaround time in terms of when the round was announced and when applications are due. So we haven't had a ton of time to really coordinate on that side of things. And I think it's sort of a crystal ball exercise to know what the other applications will be, but we do know roughly our applications and the Missoula County applications. And Tracy, I'm trying to think of what our total applications requests are. It's 2.3 million between the subawards, and this is, the total amounts are evolving a bit as we're going through this resolution process and also going through the application process on the back end of trying to put together budgets and all of the application documents. Donna, what is the total request for the Parks project?
We're actually working on getting a more accurate number. It'll probably be in the neighborhood similar to the other two projects. Not total, but around the $1 million or less.
Okay. So probably under 5 million for all of our city applications. The other component of this is there are layers of federal regulations that can add cost to these projects. So that's some of the things we're trying to scope out right now.
Thank you. Julie.
Okay, after all this discussion, I'm not sure I'm clear on process. On the agenda, it says that our recommended motion is to adopt a resolution. And I just heard Montana say that her thought was that this was going to be, that our action today was going to be to set a public hearing. I'm happy to make the recommended motion, whether it is to adopt this resolution or to set a public hearing, but I think we probably need to make that clear for the record.
Thank you. I think that was my error. The motion should be to set the public hearing, and then our ask is that you consider the resolution at the close of that public hearing. Sorry about that.
Okay, then I would, for the record, Gwen, if that's okay, I'll just say that I'll make the recommended motion to set a public hearing on these applications and this resolution.
That is, thank you. That is in order, and I appreciate the clarification. I was actually puzzling through that one also. So if we make a motion today to set the public hearing, that will go on to Monday night's agenda, and then the public hearing will be following that. So I'm sure the clerk can work through the dates on that. Jordan.
Along those lines, we don't generally have public hearings for resolutions unless we're required to for some reason, whether it's a revenue or setting fees or something like that, where state law requires us to, or where a granting organization does require us to. So just for the sake of being consistent, is that the case here where the grant process requires a public hearing?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
The requirement through Montana Department of Commerce is to have both the resolution and a public hearing process.
Thanks.
Thank you. Brian?
And just for clarification, the public hearing would open on the 27th. Montana, is that?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the floor that is in order. I'm going to call for public comment. The motion is basically setting the public hearing for all of these grant submission, which are vying for, anyway, I'm not saying this very well. Anyway, we're setting the public hearing tonight on these. Are there any public comment from anyone attending? I am not seeing any raised hands. So back to council. Any further comments or questions? Brian.
Since I'm always happy to beat a dead horse, these are all worthy endeavors. I think for public input and for council input, what would be really helpful, and at least speaking for myself, was what I inarticulately was trying to get at with the Poverello Center. And it's sort of that, what does this additional funding, if awarded, what gap does that close that other funding may not be available to do? And again, didn't put it very well, but hopefully the meaning is somewhat clear. But I think the trick here is it's difficult to prioritize, and understanding what this funding might enable a project to do that it otherwise would not be able to do, along the lines, for instance, of what Jill was describing with the POV. That sort of detail about the incremental funding would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, seeing no other comments, anything else, Montana or Tracy or Jill, that you wanted to add in?
Nope, just want to, thank the council members for your ongoing partnership and support. We really appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for that. All right, Lisa, we will have a roll call vote.
Mirta Becerra.
Yes.
John Contos.
Yes.
Heather Harp.
Yes.
Jordan Hess.
Yes.
Gwen Jones.
Yes.
Julie Merritt.
Yes.
Jesse Ramos.
Yes.
Amber Sherrill.
Yes.
Sandra Vasica.
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg.
Yes.
And Heidi West.
Yes.
That's unanimous for all in attendance.
Great, thank you. That will go on to the consent agenda. Thanks for the workup on all of these great submissions. Really appreciate it. See what we can do with this money coming in. All righty. Okay, thank you, everyone. And we have one item left on our agenda and about an hour plus to hear it, which is good. We've got a lot of time. We are returning to the resolution setting policy for the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And we heard this last week. We've set a public hearing to start this coming Monday. And we wanted to have the opportunity today to present more information, answer questions to the best of everyone's ability, and get public comment on this. So first, I had a couple of items to address, and then I know we've got Dale and Ellen Buchanan and Carl England from the MRA board. So we'll go through some information with them, but just kind of a gap, I think, in information that I wanted to address from last week. I feel like it try and issue spot and present as comprehensively as possible, but then you see where perhaps there was a gap in information. There was some discussion in the community last week following Wednesday on childcare, and I just wanted to flesh out our thoughts on childcare as a component of this resolution so that so we're on the same page, at least for discussion purposes. Under state law, of course, tax increment financing dollars cannot pay for operations, but it can pay for capital investment in terms of infrastructure and that type of thing. So when I say childcare, in my mind, is a priority that I'd like to see highlighted. To me, that means infrastructure investment in terms of streets, sidewalks, sewer, water, items like that, on a proposal that perhaps includes a childcare component. The other way I see of getting some more childcare into Missoula via tax increment financing dollars is through a build out, such as we did with the Partnership Health Clinic in the food bank building. So I certainly don't expect there to be tons and tons of childcare units added through the help of TIF and the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. But if by articulating it, it helps to bring a few projects forward that have it as a component, that's very valuable in my mind. And I also wanted to highlight that childcare has been an ongoing community discussion for years now. The Chamber of Commerce did an extensive review and analysis of the fact that we need more childcare in Missoula because our businesses are hurting. If people don't have childcare, they can't get to work, and it really does impact business and business health. The Missoula Economic Partnership has discussed childcare issues for several years now, ongoing, and it's been an issue. So I just wanted to spell that out. And in the mayor's priorities, he listed prior to the budget, childcare was listed under, I think it was wellness and safety. And I think it's also an equity issue. So just wanted to communicate that, didn't mean to have a gap in information. So Jesse, did you have a comment before we go on to everything else?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your explanation as well. I just wanted to point out too that I wasn't debating whether or not I understood what happened, what we can use TIF money for and what we can't, and wasn't stating that we were going over that. But I was just pointing out that in the resolution it says that the city strategic plan focuses on affordable housing infrastructure, development, and childcare, and it actually doesn't say that in the city strategic plan. It talks about that in the mayor's key priorities. So that's all I was trying to do, was point that out, that was not correct. Nothing about the underlying issue.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks. I think in the community there was some confusion also, just wanted to flesh that out. All righty. Thanks. Heather, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just kind of following up on that. I know because of COVID, for the last 2 years, Council hasn't been able to engage with city staff in our normal strategic planning process. So Dale, I'm wondering, like with these key priorities from the mayor, is that just kind of a supplement to that strategic plan that we last worked on, I think in 2019?
Yes, I think you should think of the mayor's priorities as the key ways we are looking at implementing the strategic plan. And one thing about the strategic plan, we set it as a 3-year planning horizon. One of the things we do want to make sure we are looking at a longer view because many, if not most of the initiatives in our strategic plan will take years to accomplish. And so we want to be mindful not to stray too far from that. So, but of course we will be doing continued updates and prioritizations with council, but that's that kind of concept behind it right now.
Thanks. And just as a follow-up, if I might, so I know we've done a couple of community surveys as well. And so I would imagine being able to hear that voice of the community, this is the mayor's version of being able to respond to those desired outcomes from our community, whether it's homelessness or housing or childcare, right?
Yeah, correct. And we timed, the mayor's priorities specifically after, getting the results of that survey and understanding key priorities, making sure that our priorities are consistent with what we heard in that survey.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. Thank you. Good point. Thanks, Heather, for that. Julie? Julie, you're muted. There you go.
I hit the button like 3 times and just having trouble with that this morning. So first, I have a couple of unrelated items. I want to apologize that I was not able to be here last week when you guys kicked off this discussion. I had a conflict that I could not avoid. So I feel like I'm maybe a little late to the party. But first is just a language thing. And this is a kind of a pet peeve of mine, if you will. Under section 1, part A, our very first statement is a negative statement of it is the city's policy not to. I would love it if we could reword that statement so that it's a positive statement, that it's our policy to do something instead of to not do something. And I think that's just semantics. But the other aspect that I wanted to is a little more conceptual, because I was recently contacted by a property owner who bought a piece of property in our ward that's in the Urban Renewal District 3, I believe that is, next to the Good Food Store. And it is definitely a blighted piece of property. And the person who recently purchased that had been in touch with the MRA about being potentially eligible for one of the facade improvement grant or money, you know what I'm talking about. And the concern that was brought up was that this resolution and this kind of prioritization that we're talking about as part of this discussion would perhaps eliminate that program. And so I guess I wanted to maybe kind of, if I could put my question as, if we say that our priorities are housing and what we got, affordable housing, childcare, and infrastructure investments, does that preclude something like a particular building that really needs a facade improvement being able to be funded?
Ellen, do you want to answer that? I can add my 2 cents in, but Ellen, what?
Yeah, I think what we tried to convey to the property owner and also to the council members involved in that email chain is that there's no question that if there is a cap placed on the amount of TIF that's available to reinvest in the community, prioritization of how we spend that money becomes much more critical. And if the strategic goals that I think MRA board and some council members, some MRA board members and some council members working on strategic goals have arrived at really revolve around housing and infrastructure, it's hard to make an argument that the facade improvement program directly addresses those goals. And I think that would be one of the first programs that I would recommend to our board that we eliminate. Because we're having, I mean, the housing and the infrastructure pieces especially are big ticket items. They're never inexpensive. And I understand the facade grants aren't very large, but they add up. So I was simply cautioning this potential. And the other complicating factor here is that she doesn't have a project yet. So there's nothing to bring to us at this point, other than she knows she wants to improve the exterior of the building. It desperately needs it. There's no question about that. But we don't fund speculative projects. So she would need a project to bring to us with an application to go to the board. And she's not there yet.
Thanks, Ellen. And Julie, I would add that for the last few years that I've been chewing on these issues and thinking about it and talking about it with people, there has been discussion of the facade improvement program. And ultimately, the best path forward seemed to be articulating priorities, but then leaving the flexibility to MRA because it is so opportunistic and year by year it changes greatly. If we were a huge urban area with millions of people, we'd have far more resources, but we are Missoula and every year it changes who walks through the door of MRA with any type of project. So leaving that flexibility for when it would be viewed as a priority by the board seemed important, but noting within the context that we are prioritizing affordable housing infrastructure, these other items. So it's not eliminated as a program necessarily, but it is not prioritized either. So if that helps articulate the philosophy. Do you have a follow-up, Julie?
Yeah, we can tell my wheels are turning. I guess one of the things, like what I have no idea what the owner is planning for this building, but it's in a great commercial spot. All of the buildings around it have been improved in the last decade or more, and this is a real sore eye right in the middle of this nice commercial part of town. And I would argue that part of affordable housing is having access to services within the neighborhood. So I don't know. I hope that to me, improvements like this particular project could benefit from really seems spot on with the MRA programs in the past. And I hope that what we're doing now doesn't just preclude some of that. So thanks.
Thanks. And as a baseline, I'll just say, I think many of us would like to do everything, but we're having to figure out how to navigate going forward. So I've got several hands here, and then we do have a bunch of information to get to in terms of presentation today. But Let's try and do a few quick questions and comments, and then we'll kind of get to the meat of today. Jesse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the discussion we're having, and I certainly appreciate Ms. Buchanan's comments. I certainly tend to agree with her on the prioritization aspect, and maybe facade is something that does need to go, not go, but be lower on the old priority list. There's just something that Ms. Buchanan said that I wanted to address, where she said that if we put a cap on how much money we can invest in the community. I just wanted to clarify that the cap, it doesn't mean that the money is just disappearing. It means that we're still going to be investing the money. It just means that it's going to be going to the school district or the county or the city, and then the city and the county, the schools, they can invest in different things too, because it is above and beyond the cap. So I understand Ms. Buchanan's world, but just wanted to clarify that for the public, that this money isn't just disappearing. It is going back to those taxing jurisdictions, and they're certainly going to invest it in different priorities that they have. So it's not disappearing. We're just shifting the money a little bit, and allowing those taxing jurisdictions to make up their decisions on what they think is best for their particular demographic, whether that's improving the schools, the county infrastructure, city infrastructure, whatever that might be. So just wanted to clarify that and say I appreciated the discussion.
Thank you. It's the core issue is navigating how to balance this. Okay, Amber?
And I think I'm just going to wait until after the presentation, so because it's possible my questions will be answered in that. I just wasn't sure the format right now, so.
Okay. All right, put a pin in it. Heidi?
Sorry, my phone just started ringing, so hold on. I have a house line still. So I just had a really quick comment that this discussion brought to mind, and I think what I'm hearing is that the facade program might go away, but probably projects like it could still be funded. It just wouldn't have its own dedicated funding source. And I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that I think is important about the MRA, or being able to use the MRA, is if it seems more accessible to people that have smaller projects, so that local entrepreneurs or businesses can access this funding source, know it's available to them. And a lot of things like affordable housing are huge projects that maybe aren't, as easily executed by, there's a select few people or organizations that can engage in those activities. And so I just want to maybe advocate for the MRA funding or to be something that's accessible to people across the spectrum, and that's important to me, I guess, that people can access smaller funding sources if it's needed, because all of those things add up to be really beneficial to individual renewal districts. But yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you. Okay, good discussion, but we've got some things that we want to cover today. Dale, did you want to, what do you want to cover today? And I know we've got Carl England, head of the MRA board, who also wants to talk. And Ellen, what do you all prefer in terms of sequencing?
So I have a presentation that is in two parts. Really, it's an update on the presentation from last week and includes information that council members had asked about last week. And so I would intend to present that, and also have a presentation on how we see the cap kind of working on the ground in the terms of what does it look like with some specific known projects, and what is it, and what does if our continued trends continue, our current trends continue for the next 5 years, what that cap, what it looks like there as well. So
Great.
I'm happy to do that, and then maybe create more discussion.
Okay, great. So for everyone watching and attending the meeting last week, we were basically looking back in time, and I think this is going to look a little bit forward, trying to extrapolate out how different scenarios could play out. I think what we need to really be paying attention to is the costs associated with decisions on all sides, because you've got a limited resource. How is it deployed, and how do we balance taxing jurisdictions, taxpayers, and what is probably our most strategic investments we can do in this community? So take it away, Dale.
Thank you. Let's see if I can. So just as a reminder, these are the three areas, issue areas that the resolution is trying to accomplish here. One is just what Gwen talked about it, is ensure an appropriate balance between the resources available in our URDs versus the operating revenues of taxing jurisdictions. Second one is ensure comment from local taxing jurisdictions is considered as part of MRA project deliberations. And three, ensure city and MRA goals are consistent, particularly in the areas of housing and infrastructure development. So just to set that context, I'm going to go through these first. I'm not going to repeat the original slides from last week, but I'm going to stop at the slides where there's been some changes.
Thanks.
So there was I'm going to back up one. Just as a note, just to highlight the fact that we started seeing these jump ups after the 2-year appraisal cycle kicked in. I think that is also about the same time the economy really started picking up as well. So I think both of those things happening at the same time contributed to the large increases we're seeing in the taxable value in TIF districts versus the total citywide taxable value. Just a reminder, we've made remittances in the past, and these are the amounts of remittances that are made in fiscal year 2019 and 2020. Of those gross remittance amounts there, the city received approximately $750,000. I'm skipping forward. Whoop. Heather had asked about peer city comparisons. And this is this is what it is for our peer cities. And you see that Missoula is among the highest here, and with Butte, Silver Bow here at a little bit higher than us. And I think part of that is attributable to the fact that Missoula and Butte have long-standing programs in IF districts, where a lot of the cities are really just starting to get into it in recent times. So I think that is why I think we are higher compared to this. And as I mentioned last week, the rural areas tend to have a larger percentage to be able to get enough increment in. But this is where Missoula stands as of this of fiscal year 22 with our peer cities.
Thank you.
So shifting gears into what the proposed limitation on taxable value means. This is a scenario where we talked about a couple of the high priority projects that are high priority for the city along with our private partners here. And so we have created two ones here: Riverfront Triangle, which is the development of the event center and that complex. While that project stopped because of the pandemic, there has been a lot of talk about it, and we are actually confident that that is going to move forward in some form in iteration in the short term. And then the Scott Street area housing projects, the city partnership with Rivara to develop the city's Scott Street site. Plus, it also incorporates some of the known housing projects that MRA has been working closely with. So just those projects themselves our estimate is that they're going to create about $2.7 million in newly taxable property. that will be included in our increment districts. And what the approach we took here was to freeze everything else. So we assumed that that citywide taxable value would only grow by this growth rate, and all the other increment districts stayed the same, just for the purposes of this valuation. And then we did what the effect of that would be on 9% incremental value cap as currently proposed, or a 10% cap, just to show some differences in this. So what this shows is that the inclusion of these projects in here does in fact create a limitation. They would cause us to go over the current proposed cap. And this is the amount that is over the cap at 9% and 10%. We would trigger a remittance of 1.7 million at the 9% and 184,000 at the 10%. And then this is the amount that the city would receive as part of that, the 464. We are approximately 29 to 30% of the total mill levies in the city. And then just as a point of context related to how that remittance affects the other URDs, we made the assumption that in this scenario that all of the remittances would come out of URD 3. It is a more mature district that has a capacity. And so at a $1.7 million remittance, that's approximately 33% of the capacity of that particular district, or 3.4% at 10%.
Before you go on, Dale, can we talk a little bit more about this? And I just want to talk about the Riverfront Triangle project, which I sat on the working group for several years when I first got on council. That's a super heavy lift that has incredible potential and impact on our community. And my first question is, how long has that sat vacant? I want to say 20 to 25 years. Do you recall?
Ellen, can you hop in here on the history?
Sure. Well, it was the first project that Chris Bean worked on 34 years ago. So it predates him a bit. So it's over 35 years old.
Okay, great. Thanks. So for over 3 decades, we have had this dormant asset sitting in our downtown that could be an anchor, basically, for the west side of our downtown. And I know it does, based on the agreements that came through council, I think there is an affordable housing component in a very large development. But we're looking at this 2.2 million basically is a potential contemplated MRA investment to facilitate getting that thing built, which it sat for over 3 decades as a dormant asset. And we've had basically no income coming in from that in terms of property taxes. But if it gets built, if 2.2 million is part of the equation to get the thing built so that we have this powerhouse of economic activity in that area of town, and it's bonded, we will not be seeing property tax income for a period of years, but eventually we will. And I guess what I go back to is, if this had been built decades ago, we'd be seeing it now. So time is money. And at some point we need to get going with this. So Dale or Ellen, did you have a comment regarding that?
Well, just as a follow-up on Riverfront Triangle, as I mentioned, there is some, I would say, a high level of development interest here. And I just want to clarify that the $2.2 million is the taxable value, we believe, of the development as a result of over $100 million in private investment. And there's going to be, and the MRA investment would be millions of dollars. I don't have the number off the top of my head of our forecasts under the original drift plan, but it is, it's probably in the $15 million range of TIF investment that is contemplated on this site.
Great, and thank you for that clarification. Sorry, I misspoke. I meant to say, you're right. It's in that category of investment, which has always been contemplated to be bonded. So we would not see property tax income coming from that for a period of years, but we also have not seen property tax income coming from that or revenue for the last 30 plus years. So I'd rather we move forward at some point. Ellen, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, just the same point that Dale made. The TIF investment is going to be significant. I think the last numbers we ran was somewhere in the neighborhood of $16 million. So basically what this project does, if we are successful in attracting a private developer, is it consumes all of the revenues it generates for a period, or basically all of the revenue that it generates for a period of the length of the debt service.
Great, thank you. Brian, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, quickly, I was going to make the same clarification that Dale already did around the numbers there representing estimated taxable value. Two things. Thanks for the sensitivity analysis, Dale, between 9 and 10. And then a stupid question that I'm going to regret asking that's down in the weeds. Why is the remittance value slightly less than the value over the cap, as opposed to being equal to the amount?
The taxable value, the remittance dollars is the amount applied on the mills. So it's actually close because citywide, with all jurisdictions, we're close to 1,000 mills. If it was 1,000 mills exactly, you would see that they would be the same.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Julie.
I'm not going to pretend to have understood anything that Dale just said. And again, I apologize for not being here last week. And this is probably a dumb question too, but I thought my understanding of the 9% cap was that we had the option of either spending it on projects that come in, or if we don't have enough projects to spend it on, then we would be faced with remittance if we're over that 9% cap. Is that really simplistic understanding? Am I on the right track?
Dale, do you want to answer that, or otherwise?
Sure. Not exactly. The current law requires that if there is any excess tax increment dollars that are not contemplated to be spent on specific projects, that has to be remitted. However, what the resolution does here says that across the city, we are going to limit the amount of taxable value we would want to have in all of our districts in order to make sure we have an appropriate balance between the amounts available to taxing jurisdictions versus available for projects in URDs. So this would have the effect of limiting the amount of capacity in MRA to do those projects in order to free up funds for the other taxing jurisdictions, including the city.
Julie, is that making sense? And we can.
Well, I guess I'm wondering if we have like excess money in MRA, is it partially a problem of we just don't have enough projects coming in to spend it on? Or I feel like I'm kind of missing the boat here.
I think it's not necessarily targeting excess dollar of. It's not the cap isn't targeting excess dollars. It's targeting what is an appropriate balance of resources we should have in the TIF versus the city general fund and our other taxing jurisdictions.
Okay, I think I'm starting to catch on here. Thank you.
Ellen, did you want to add anything?
Only that just because there is revenue that's uncommitted in a district doesn't mean we don't have enough projects to do. It may well mean that we're trying to build enough capacity to do transformative projects that will have much longer lasting effects. And the prime example of that is doing something transformative with Brook Street. And District 3 finally is at a place capacity wise where we can think on the scale that would be transformative. And we've been working on that for several years. Jordan's been involved in that effort, and others of you have as well. And so just because there is capacity in a district doesn't mean there aren't things to spend it on. We're trying to prioritize how to spend that money to have the longest range and most impact on the city into the future.
Great, thank you. Does that flesh it out for you better, Julie?
So it's really about the value of the property that's in the districts, not the amount of revenue that's there. I see Carl shaking his head. I
guess I'll make one statement that maybe clarify it is what the cap does is it makes once MRA reaches the cap, it's the growth in MRA is tied to the growth in the tax base. It can't grow faster than the rest of the tax base.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for clarification purposes, Dale, I think this might be helpful for some of my other fellow council members and then as well as members of the public. So that total taxable value, essentially that's 1.89%, if I'm correct, of the total market value within those TIF districts. So roughly 1.2, 1.3 billion total value, and then the taxable value is just using that formula. I believe for most commercial properties, and obviously there's residential and commercial, but about one, am I correct on that?
Yep. Yes, you are.
Okay, just to add some further clarification on that. And then, Madam Chair, I have another follow-up.
Go ahead.
But so just wanted to address the Fox Triangle project, and certainly not trying to say that we don't need something there, but wouldn't you say that it would be fair to say that a lot of the reason why development hasn't happened there is because the city actually owns a key chunk of land down there and hasn't wanted to sell it unless certain parameters have been met, and if the city had sold that, there's a good chance that some sort of development would have happened there, but maybe not what we want with a giant conference center or something. Would that be a fair assessment?
So there have been hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours spent on the Fox Triangle. And since the land was gifted to us years ago, since I was one of the participants sitting on the working group, there was a very strong feeling that as a fiduciary duty, we needed to use it as wisely as possible to have a transformative project there. So there could have been other things built over the years that would have been far more minimal, in my opinion. So we are not yet done with Dale's presentation, and I see more hands. Let's get through those questions, and then we're going to keep going. Merta?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question / need of clarification about remittances. And Dale, did I hear you say that any remittance after reaching that cap would come out of URD 3, or would it come out of all the URDs? And I guess regardless of where that funding comes out of for a remittance, my question is, what happens to, for example, taxing jurisdictions like Hellgate Elementary School? That is a taxing jurisdiction, but it's nowhere near any URD, or MUTD, I think it's another taxing jurisdiction. So can you quickly just clarify for me how that would work?
Yes. So the remittance is applicable to any taxing jurisdiction within that URD. And so we know which levies are in particular districts. In fact, Hellgate School District is in part of the Scott Street North Reserve URD. So to the extent there would be a remittance from them, there would be a remittance to that school district as well. But yeah, by law, we are required to make the remittances under those underlying mill levies. Under the resolution, what it states is that the MRA has the ability to choose the areas where the remittance would come from, which URDs, based on a number of factors that are listed there, debt service requirements, committed projects, and those type of things. So, and we were using URD 3 as an example as our one of the most mature districts and one that has a significant amount of capacity.
Thanks.
Great. Amber?
Yeah, thanks. I have some questions that I would like to hold and to see if they're covered, but I'm kind of stuck on something you said, Dale. You said that this would make it where the TIF, I guess, can't grow faster than the rest of the tax base. And I want to get a little more clarification on that, because I actually thought the whole idea of TIF was to let that curve go up in the graph that we all see, and we want it to grow faster than the rest of the tax base. So am I hearing that out of context? That worried me.
No, I think that's correct. I think, URDs when they're established are, that there was a finding of blight and there was incentive to create additional investment. And so that, it is the intention that we would want our TIF districts to grow faster than the regular tax base. However, there is a point that if we have too much capacity in a TIF district, in the TIF districts, that does prevent tracts and jurisdictions like the city in maintaining enough capacity. And one of the objectives of this resolution is to find that appropriate balance on that.
Thanks.
Okay, Jesse, one last question, and then I want to have Dale move forward with his presentation. So go ahead, Jesse.
I'll just wait till the end, Madam Chair. I apologize. Something just came up, but I'll wait till the end.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, Dale, thanks for answering all of those questions, and sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's all good stuff. So
no, not at all. It's it's a great discussion. And so I'm going to move to the next slide, which is projected taxable values and increments for projecting the next 5 years based on current growth trends. So I'll talk about my specific assumptions in here, and I want to stress that these are estimates. These forward-looking numbers are. I can only guarantee you that they're wrong, right? Just keep that in mind. But I'll talk about some of the assumptions I've made in here. So the top line here is total taxable value of the city. Use the growth percentage that we've seen since 2018 through 2022 and projected that growth here. And in fact, changed and also modeled it after the reappraisal cycles. So you'll see we're expecting it to be pretty flat next year, a substantial increase in the following year. And that's how we are expecting that to go based on the reappraisal cycles. I did not make an adjustment relative to thinking of how the real estate, with the crazy real estate market we have, is that's going to be continuing in the next 5 years. I assume that's just going to be the same. And so this has become, and then the same thing for the tax increment districts, but they have been growing substantially faster than the rest of the tax base. But I did adjust that down. The 24% is actually discounted 50% from what it was. Reappraisal cycles, there was, particularly in the original implementation of the 2-year reappraisal cycle, and I don't know if it was actually related to that, but there was a huge increase, particularly in commercial properties, that really affected some of the URDs. That was a one-time increase that, these are my words, that I think that it was a catch up on some undervalued properties in certain URD areas. And so I wanted to take that out of here. I didn't think it was going to be sustainable. So this is still very, I would say, aggressive, but this is our estimate of what incremental tax base would go if we continue to see this hot development environment that we are seeing today. And then you can see how the incremental revenues would grow. And the next series of numbers here is the effect of the cap and remittances and the effects on the URDs at a 9% versus a 10% cap, just to provide a little bit of a sensitivity here. So here are the incremental values. You can see how the remittances changes. So remittance, we don't anticipate hitting a cap next year, but they would start hitting soon after, and both at 9 and 10%. So significant remittance in at 2024 at $4 million, or at 10%, $2.6 million of taxable value. Here's the actual remittance that the city would receive. The cap, annual increment cap, and the revenue cap. So what this does is this shows, while MRA revenues continue to grow with the cap at either 9 or 10%, it's going to grow at this pace rather than at this pace. That's that difference. And then this shows what the remittance is as a percentage of URD3, again, talking about just the place, I think the most likely, in working with Alan, the most likely place that the most of the remittance would come from would be URD3, and the effect specifically on those. You see in these later years, the amounts actually get bigger than the actual amount available in URD3, and it's going to be, and this is the gross amount of URD3, it's not considering debt service. So we are actually contemplating some new ways of looking at this to make sure we're not going to get into these type of situations out in the out years, and thinking about how we may look at the cap with considering debt service more specifically. But wanted to show you those effects. So it is a significant investment from MRA to get the remittances under these caps. And then the next slide, just a couple more here. This is the general fund, city general fund projections over the next few years. This is our estimated growth rates, assuming that we're growing, we get able to trend our revenues at 0.5% of inflation based on state law. And this is the average of newly taxable value we've seen since 2018 using that same 5-year parameter. I did make an adjustment to take out the taxable value related to the annexation of the airport. That was a one-time newly taxable property increase that skewed this. So you can see general fund growth here is 3%, and and starting to decline a little bit because I froze the newly taxable property number at the 5-year average or the previous 5 years. So while 3% seems adequate, in a growing community, what we have and what that is able to give us is the ability to maintain our inflationary pressures. It helps us get to our salary increases. It helps us pay increases in costs. But what it doesn't do in a growing city is get us more police officers. It doesn't give us maintenance dollars to approve the added roads that we get as the community grows. So we are really and it doesn't provide for as the city grows, Fire Station 6 and the staff required for that. So those are the growth pressures that we're facing to do that. Now, if you look back on those slides, those remittances are in the $400,000 to $600,000 range that would contribute back to the city, and those are certainly helpful in helping us get to those growth dollars. But without substantial tax reform in this state, we're going to face at some point in the future decisions on our level of service standards. And just the other part of this is that I'm using an average of newly taxable property numbers, and that's the biggest part of our new revenues. But what this slide shows is I use the average. So based on that, that at least half the time the numbers are going to be below that. And what this shows is our history in that. And this is the past few years. Even though our economy has been pretty strong and a lot of growth, we've had a fairly low level of newly taxable property. This big spike is largely due to the airport annexation that I spoke of earlier. This year we had a good healthy one. This got to the average of what we used to see prior to the recession. But before that, we've been down here where our newly taxable property numbers have not been able to pay enough to maintain our level of service. And then just a reminder, next steps after A&F committee today, council public hearing opens on September 20th. Anticipate coming back to you on A&F next Wednesday in order to talk about some other, I mentioned a little bit about concepts we're concerning to try to deal with how we might do those remittances, and then final consideration concluded. Final consideration by council on September 27th.
Great. And yes, I think we need to keep this in committee for a week from today. As you said, I think, we've had some ideas hatch. This is always a process, bringing new legislation. We've had some ideas hatch that I think we need to think through a little bit more before we can really articulate it next week. But in general, this has been we're having a good discussion here. Brian.
Two quick questions, and I know I really want to hear from MRA board chair and any board members. Dale, could you put your slides back up quickly?
Once you start asking your question, Brian, while I try to find my
Zoom. So two quick things. Do you happen to know, I knew this at one point, but don't remember it, that newly developed property outlier with the airport annexation, do you know where that point would be with that taken out? I knew you took it out in the other analysis in the chart or in the matrix, but on that graph, I'd just be curious to know. And then the second thing, just probably more substantive, you mentioned with the estimates around the growth in the tax base and in the general fund, corresponding the general fund, that was roughly, and maybe I misheard you. I thought I heard you say that was enough to cover, for instance, like salary increases, those sorts of year-to-year increases in operating expenses. Looking at those numbers, which I think were in the sort of high 800,000 range, I don't think it does cover, when I think about the last few years of budget, I mean, I think it's shy of covering that. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct. It doesn't. So, the property tax levy covers about half of the general fund expenses, and that varying on the year, but approximately half. So we're relying on other revenues for half of it. But what property taxes are that kind of steady stream of revenues that we need. So to the extent that municipal court fees or grants or other charges for services we have in permitting and those types of things aren't meeting our inflationary pressures of salary increases and those other things, the general fund is our place to go for that. So it typically doesn't. So in the general fund, for example, the salary increase costs about $1.2 million. And you could see
that's what I remember.
Chart, and you can see by that chart that if the general fund had to cover that entirety of it by these growth numbers, it doesn't even cover that. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's exactly what I was wondering about. And then on the chart that you had up, the graph, do you happen to know where that dot, the second to last one for 20, would be absent the annexation?
Let's see. This is just off the top of my head. It was still a large number. I think it would have been just over 5 million. Yeah, just right around 5 million. So it would have been still a good piece of growth. It affected that projection by about 0.5%.
Amber.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, this is a really interesting discussion. I think I've voiced this in the last one. I do have some concern around being in a state right now where the legislature is trying to handcuff local governments, and we have one source of income to get projects done. I worry a little bit about handcuffing ourselves, and I don't want to. I would like to hear kind of Dale's thoughts around that. And also, one of the things that I brought up last time is, I worry about this cap in the situation that our housing prices actually drop significantly. I know we're on a bubble, and I know we all love Missoula so much that we're kind of convinced to some degree. I feel like that it's going to keep going that direction, but that is not a known thing. So I guess I want to hear about your thoughts on that, Dale, and anyone else's. I want to make sure that we're being smart, thinking about the future and what could and couldn't happen, whether we're talking about legislative changes and further handcuffing on local authority, or potentially a major drop in our housing market.
Great. Dale, or?
Well, I guess from my perspective, and and I think anybody's perspective is appropriate here. We do have to find a balance between our operating goals, say in the city, and maintaining our level of service there, and also versus the goals that we are accomplishing out of MRA. They are both super important. MRA has been our number one tool and partner in getting a lot of our key priorities done, key infrastructure projects done, and so that's important. And I want to be mindful that we don't want to it's definitely a balancing act, and these are important choices that council is faced here to make these things. I guess one thing that I would say is, from a staff perspective as we implement and manage these things is, we tend to try to take a long-term view to all of these things. We want to, we're looking at plans that take years to come to fruition. And so to the extent that we can make sure as we implement a limitation such as this one, that we are doing it, that we don't have an effect in our near-term projects, that we want to make sure we are able to contemplate that what we've been working on for years and think about a way to implement this in the that changes our thinking over the long term. And it's just easier to manage that way rather than having to rather than pivot, let's make sure we do it thoughtfully.
And I would add your concern, Amber, about having a drop in property values and then ultimately that being reflected in property taxes. I think maybe we could put a pin in it and discuss it next week, but I think both Dale and Ellen can speak to the fact that, first of all, bond counsel is in ongoing discussions regarding this resolution because we have debt with MRA, with projects and anytime we issue debt through Missoula Redevelopment Agency, there have to be buffers in place to account for if there are economic issues in the long run. So I think that's a bit of a complicated discussion and that's about as far as I can get into it, but perhaps next week we could address that issue if that would be okay. Because I do want to keep going and I want to get Carl to talk eventually, so. All right.
And that would be great. That was actually going to be my next question is understanding how this affects our debt service. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
All right, put that on the list for next week. Jesse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question for Dale. So I know that we've talked about kind of some of the negatives, actually a lot of the negatives of putting a cap on the TIF projects. In your estimation, Dale, what are some of the benefits to putting a cap on it? I know you talked about natural growth not quite covering city operating expenses, raises. Would you see that as a potential benefit that remittance can help cover some of that so we don't have to raise property taxes as much?
Yes, I mean, that is exactly the balance that we needed to try to strike here, right? Our ability to get to be able to, essentially keep the lights on and maintain a level of service that we have been accustomed to, and in a growing community, inflation pays, your way. Right now, we really haven't had enough, really, since the recession, to pay our that our natural growth in the tax base has been enough to pay for our current level of service, or even just to just kind of maintain our inflationary pressures. We don't get that now, and so that's why really in the past 10 years, I would say, levy increases have been required just to do that, and then add new staff and those things for as the community grows. We need more police officers. We need more firefighters. We are seeing drops in level of service from the federal and state government, and so we need to. And so we started getting involved in housing issues, which hasn't been necessarily a local responsibility in the past. So all of those type of things add up to these pressures. And so, but we need to be able to find the process on, like housing example is, not only do we need to have MRA investment on housing projects to make sure we can get that they help provide the affordable units. We need the operating side so we can keep our staffs and keep the appropriate level of people and resources available to run those programs that we're creating in the housing. So everything is related to that balance.
Follow up, Madam Chair?
Sure.
So Dale, what other conversations have you had with other elected officials representing these different districts about the potential cap and what they think between 9, 10% or no cap? I know that we're talking about having some of them on kind of like an ad hominem type, or not ad hoc committee. So have you talked to them about this, and then some of the benefits to them if we do put this cap in place? And what have their thoughts been, if you have?
Yeah, so I've talked with the county specifically about this, and they're facing the same growth pressures that we are, in there, and they follow the same laws related to mill levy caps and everything. So yeah, they see the benefit of an appropriate balance here. They have TIF districts too, that are outside the city limits that they manage. But yeah, to the extent that they would get remittances, certainly helps the same pressures. School districts, I haven't had a specific conversation recently related to the school districts. They're a little different in how the remittance is, they deal with the remittance. They don't necessarily get the benefit of the remittance because their property tax caps aren't set by values or mills, they're set by enrollment. So they, and I think you saw in the media earlier, they had a drop in enrollment. So they actually lowered their revenues. They had to lower their mill levies based on law. So here, if they get a remittance, they're required to consider that as part of their property tax cap, and they would actually lower mills in order to deal with that. So there isn't really necessarily a direct effect on school districts here.
Yeah, and
it would just be a benefit for the.
Sorry,
I had a quick follow-up, Madam Chair.
Well, I would supplement that answer with, over the years, I've spoken both with Pat McHugh, who is the Dale Bickle equivalent for MCPS, and also with Mark Thane. And then I've kept current administration, of course, current on this issue with emails that we're currently hearing this resolution. And I do think there's a caveat there that they can benefit in that they can fill their reserves. But as I was told, however, the state can also come in and sweep their reserves at any point in time. But there is that benefit to them for what it's worth. But also, they have been very supportive of MRA and understand and appreciate the value of the projects done in Missoula, and specifically housing and sidewalks. They have hundreds of homeless school children every year, and they want them housed because it's a much better environment, and they also want kids walking to school safely. So there's overlap in those areas, and that's the value of having a bit of a stronger connection and communication. But you had one quick follow-up, Jesse, and then we've got to get to Carl because we're running out of time.
Yeah, I'll make this really quick, but just kind of what Dale was saying, where maybe, and what you said helped, Madam Chair, with the reserve fund. I don't know if the state government's ever swept these in recent memory, but that would certainly be concerning if they did. But in any event, even though, let's just say that it is based on enrollment, which it is, there would still be a benefit to the taxpayers if I'm not correct, Dale, in the sense that there'd be less mills levied for the same services rendered. So maybe the school isn't necessarily seeing a direct benefit, but certainly the taxpayers are, which I think is a net benefit overall. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
That is true.
Great. Okay. Carl England is here from the Missoula Redevelopment Board, as well as Ruth Reineking. And Carl, thank you for your patience today and listening. And I hope you're getting a sense of this entire discussion, and wanted to have you here today to give your thoughts on this and input from the MRA board. So welcome, Carl.
Well, thank you. Are you adjourning at noon?
12:15.
Okay. So let me just thank you for holding this over. Thanks for hearing us. Thanks for your faith in us to do the job of board members of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, which is to provide citizen oversight over an incredible staff, to ensure that the MRA funds are spent wisely and appropriately. And as you know, in accordance with the law, which provides that we can put some money into public projects, we can put some money into the elimination of blight, and then we can put money into the private projects, the public aspects of private projects, all of which have to be in accordance with city approved plans for each district. So our job is to ensure that the program is administered in accordance with the law and the plans and the city policy, which we don't make, nor should we make. And while we do have considerable discretion within the policy and the plans as they now exist, I think it's important to take a step back and understand that within the area of tax increment finance, the council makes the most important decisions. It decides whether to use the tool. It decides whether to create a district. It decides the borders of the district. It decides, it has the final say on the plans for what's to occur in the district. It has the ability to change those plans. Council has final decisions on any bonding, final decisions on any sale or purchase of property within the district, and of course, final decisions through the remittance process on the budget. So, in spite of some rhetoric that was been around that we're some sort of rogue or uncontrolled or uncontrollable agency, that's just simply not the case. We operate in accordance with the law. I know there's some heartbreak about giving public money to private developers, but the law says that we must afford maximum opportunity to the rehabilitation, redevelopment of urban renewal areas by private enterprise. Frankly, we've always done so. We've never approved a plan that isn't authorized. We've never made a recommendation for issuing a bond that the council's turned down. We've never made a recommendation to purchase or sell property that the council's turned down. There's no instance where we've approved something that's not authorized, and no instance of where we've recommended any changes in the plan that have been turned down. And so what we do is administer the program in cooperation with the city. It can't be done without cooperation of the city administration. And in doing that, concentrating on keeping our eye on the prize, which is the goals and objectives of the plans for the public benefit. And in doing that, we have, according to those plans, helped preserve some of Missoula's most iconic buildings. We've provided funding to improve the functioning of Missoula's public buildings, including City Hall, the courthouse, the libraries, the police station, the elections office, the fire stations, the health department building, the transfer station, Jefferson School, Hellgate High School, Art Museum, et cetera, et cetera. We've provided fundings for parks, which would otherwise come out of other budgets. So we've built Silver Park and provided funding to McCormick Park, Best Reed Park, Evelyn Borg Johnson Park, Karis Park, MRL Park, etc. We've supported the work of Missoula's, the good work of Missoula's nonprofit community, and given resources to many, many, many small businesses that are doing redevelopment projects, and to small businesses that got big and have kept jobs in Missoula, like Onyx Maps and Missoula and the Montana Consumer Direct. And housing is, of course, a big issue now. It's the dominant issue, but it's always been the focus of the work that the MRA has done. We recently got some preliminary numbers that show over the life of these districts, over $200 million have been spent on housing in MRA districts, of which MRA has contributed 14 million of that. And our support for projects put forth by the entities like Homeward and the Missoula Housing Authority and the Mental Health Center and the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, and some private developers who've developed affordable housing, show that affordability has always been an issue with us. And when it comes to working for the taxpayers of Missoula, we've built and contributed funds to not one, not two, but 3 parking structures and parking under the Rome, and not 2, not 3, but 4 footbridges, and the installation of water mains and consolidated utility services. We contributed construction of a basketball court years ago. And we've paid for traffic circles, traffic lights, crosswalks, fire hydrants, streets lighting, culverts, construction, streets and alleys, and miles of curbs and gutters. And in the last decade, 15 miles of sidewalks in neighborhoods that would that needed them and whose homeowners couldn't afford them. And so we've done this public work with, of course, the considerable efforts of an amazing staff that works patiently and with a variety of people and helps guide them through the process, and who work through one tough problem after another, because it's, instead of letting problems stop them, they figure out how to get those solutions to those problems and then move on. And also in that process, not inconsequently, accounting for every dime in and out. It's amazing the number of absolutely clean audits we have year after year after year after year. And the success is proven by the numbers. The growth in the district is, as someone pointed out earlier, exactly what's supposed to happen. But now, because of noise, which I think is largely based in political disputes about the proper role of the city, and in a significant amount of misinformation about TIF, noise that we've done, frankly, a very poor job of combating. You've perceived that there's a signal of public concern within the context of the entirety of city government as to the proper role or the future role of what has been and what will continue to be a very effective agency. And I acknowledge, as I did in the beginning, that it's your job to address that concern, your job to set policy for the city so that Missoula citizens have faith in their local government. I think you've had a good discussion today on the intricacies of a cap. But it's a novel idea. We're headed into uncharted waters. And so I would simply ask that before the cap is enacted, we continue to work together to determine if we can measure what it will mean and what effect it could have on the projects and goals that you've set for us. And what we've seen today is that while We should probably follow the advice of Yogi Berra and not make predictions, particularly about the future. We know that based upon plans that have already been approved for Riverfront Triangle, and based on where we have to go if we're going to accomplish affordable housing on the Scott Street property, that when those developments occur, they will add significantly to the tax base. They will require significant investment of money in the infrastructure. They will put us over the 9%, and there will be remittances, and we talk about it as capacity, but the bottom line is that the place from which we make remittances are the places that have cash. And that's ERD 3, that's the Brook Street corridor. And we have capacity there because we've had a lot of private development there. And from the very beginning of Brook Street, the plan that was approved from the very beginning recognized that Brook Street itself needed a significant amount of work to make it the street that it has become, as opposed to the street for which it was built. And that takes a significant amount of investment. We have the opportunity right now with all this discussion about infrastructure and all of that stuff to maybe get some of that work done. But it's going to require a significant amount of planning, which people have been at for a long time as we try and figure out how to do that. And it's also going to require a significant investment of city funds. And if we don't have those funds, we can't get that done. Now, that's your job. I get it. There are priorities. I would eat my hat if I'm the first representative of an agency that's come before you and said, we can't do what we think we need to do without more money. So I get it, but and again, I acknowledge that's your job, but we need to have those discussions because the idea of the cap is new, it's significant, and we need to make sure we know what we're doing before we move into that. Let me just address the other two parts of the resolution just so we're clear. Adding 3 ex officio board members. We've never turned anybody away. We've never said to a council person or a county commissioner or representative of a school district, you go do your thing and we'll do ours. We have an acknowledged respect for anyone that comes to the MRA and wants to participate, and that's particularly true of the representatives of taxing jurisdictions, people that have skin in the game. As Gwen mentioned, in the development of the Sawmill District plan and in the development of the plan for the Riverfront Triangle, both of which took years to develop and were very complicated. We had city council people on subcommittees and they were invaluable. It was fantastic. But other than that, the only time we ever saw city council people come to our meetings was when they wanted support for a proposal in their ward, and I can't think of a time that we said no, and the same is true of the county and the school district. We've reached out. We at one point had a representative from the Historic Preservation Commission, and for years, Dorothy Ogg came to all of our meetings and was a valuable contributor, but when she no longer could do that, right before she passed away, she was replaced, I think, once or twice or maybe 3 times by people who didn't show. We were asked by a former council member to change our meetings from Wednesday to Thursday so that individual could attend. We did it and they never attended. So we've not been able to accomplish what I think this resolution seeks to accomplish by adding these people, which is getting more people to come from the places that have skin in the game, And we think that the more people who see what we actually do, who are willing to sit through the oftentimes tedious details of projects, who are willing to contribute constructively, the better it is. We're proud of what we do. We're happy to have more people involved. And then the last part, the plan, I think you're aware of the fact that after the last remittance, we started talking about this. And frankly, it was an idea that many of us had. My concern was after the last remittance that perhaps council was looking at the future of MRA differently than what we were. And so we sat down with some city council people and administration and a couple of board members. It turns out that we were in substantial agreement about where we were headed and what we needed to do. There were no conflicts. We're frankly very, very close to having this, but we didn't get it done because, in part because this is something that really works better when we can meet all together in a room, and we keep thinking, well, that'll be soon, and turns out not to be. So COVID's interfered with this, but also because there was real no necessity to continue to push on this because there wasn't a divergence of an opinion. And the strategic plan is, of course, a wonderful idea. And I think we all recognize a point that someone made earlier that it's important that the plan recognize that times and economics change, and so the plan must change. And we don't know. We have no clue for certain what tomorrow will bring, literally what project will walk in the door tomorrow. And one of the strengths of MRA has been its ability to be nimble and to respond to the unexpected. And then last but not least, I think Gwen's comments about childcare, we got it. I mean, we understand childcare is a priority and totally non-controversial and a necessity, and the limitations that we have in dealing with it. And for us to take this opportunity for all of us to remind ourselves that we should keep thinking about this creatively is there's no absolutely, of course we can do that. So I thanks again for hearing us out. Thanks again for holding us over so we could be here, and thanks for your support, cooperation of our work, and thank you all for your work to keep our city a nice and livable place.
Thank you, Carl. And I hope you can attend a week from today on Wednesday, and I'll try and use the time a little bit better to accommodate your time if you want to speak. We're going to go a couple minutes over here, folks. Jesse, I'm going to have to put your question off till next week because we're literally over time right now, and I still want to take public comment. I did want to just say thank you for your comments, Carl. Thank you for highlighting all of those projects. It's so important to talk about what MRA has done, and frankly, my favorite example is to use that back in the 1990s, MRA paid for brand new windows for Hellgate High School, which is an excellent example of public benefit as well as collaboration with the school district. And you are absolutely correct. You guys have always had an open door policy in terms of public comment. People have to walk through the door and give a comment. So this resolution with institutionalizing some of those relationships is not meant as a criticism. It is meant as a nudge or a prod to hopefully encourage greater communication on behalf of those entities. So that just wanted to follow up with that.
Well, if I could just say, and with in hindsight, we could do a better job of getting that. Or the problem, where we've fallen down is that we have concentrated so much on getting the work done that we just go from one project to the next to the next. And so, we're looking at a project, it's near a school, get her done, nobody complains. Nobody, everyone supports it. We probably could have called the school district and said, will you come and support this, or what do you think? And so I hope my comments didn't come off as being defensive.
No.
It's just that, and I think you're absolutely right. I think what you're doing is trying to institutionalize what's always been our policy, which is come and sit at the table, particularly the taxing jurisdictions. Come and sit at the table and help us work through these things.
Absolutely. Great. I am going to call for public comment for people who have patiently been waiting and possibly listening. And if anyone does want to give public comment, you need to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any raised, but there we go. Grant Keir. You should be able to speak. Are you able to talk, Grant?
I'm able to talk. Are you able
there you
to
go.
hear me?
Great.
Thanks so much for a chance to speak on the topic for the day. I just wanted to stress, I very much appreciate the challenge the city is under. I appreciate that everyone is trying to strike a balance of how much TIF is in our community and where every tax dollar goes, whether it's to improve those urban renewal districts or to support the general work of the city to achieve many objectives. However, I do want to stress, and I guess I should have started by echoing everything Carl just said, but we are in the midst of the comprehensive economic development strategy, a process to really understand what's happening in our community and in our economy. What I can tell you right now is we are really in unprecedented times and somewhat uncharted waters. There's never been a more important time for us to have tools to influence and shape wherever possible our economy in positive ways. We have so few of them already. This is one tool that's been a very powerful tool for our community, so much so that it's frankly the envy of many of our peer communities across Montana who come and ask our staff to give them tours of our community to understand what we've done with TIF to revitalize our economy and to really set ourselves on such a great trajectory. I guess I would say there's no question, and you will see this when we unveil our comprehensive economic development strategy, that one of the things holding our businesses back today is workforce. Two of the things that hold our workforce back today are the availability and affordability of housing and childcare. There's no question that the issues that you are all concerned about are the right issues to be concerned about. They are issues that are impacting our economy, but they are some of the most complex to address. And right now, and some of the most expensive. And the TIF having a cap might be the thing that makes it harder to address them in creative ways with that tool rather than easier. So I just want to echo Carl's comments and his urging of caution to take this step. And I think there's a tremendous partnership between MRA and the city that we see as a third party, one we hope to continue to be a part of in terms of trying to find and strike that balance of economic development and the appropriate use of TIF in place and time. And I think conversations between all of the stakeholders and party members can do a great job of that at a time when we need flexibility, maybe better so than a new policy at such a complicated time in our economic history. So thank you very much for a chance to convey our thoughts. And if we have additional thoughts, we'll send them in writing.
Thank you. I'm going to reiterate that we are opening the public hearing this coming Monday, and this is going to be kept in committee. We will be hearing it a week from today, September 22nd also. Jesse and Sandra, I see your hands are raised. We're already 7 minutes over of what little lunch hour we have. Do you have something super quick, or could it wait until next week?
Oh, I just noticed that Amber and Jesse waited to say their comments until the end of the period. So I was just curious of what they had to say.
Okay. And Jesse, can you just wait till next week? We're good?
Yeah, it can wait till next week if Mr. England's going to be in next week as well.
Okay.
I have a question specifically.
Okay, we'll work on that, and you can always communicate with him outside of this, but all right, great. Thank you. I scheduled a ton of time and we needed every minute and more, but we will be back. We will be continuing to work on this project. Okay, thank you everyone for a robust meeting and the public comment, and we will stand adjourned.